Blood has a way of telling stories that lips cannot. On the pristine white marble of the master bathroom floor in Oakwood Heights, the crimson arterial spray spoke volumes about betrayal, rage, and the violent end of financier Michael Bennet. The September morning sunshine streamed through skylights, illuminating what should have been an ordinary Tuesday in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods, but instead cast theatrical shadows across a crime scene that would soon captivate the nation. 5 uniformed officers stood frozen in professional shock, their radios crackling with static as crime scene technicians unpacked equipment in the circular driveway below, where curious neighbors had already begun to gather behind hastily established police tape. Emma Taylor, the Bennetts' personal assistant of 3 years, stood trembling in the hallway, her phone still clutched in her hand from the 911 call she'd made 17 minutes earlier. She had arrived at 8:15 a.m. as usual, let herself in with her key, called out a greeting that echoed through the 6,000-square-foot minimalist mansion, and proceeded upstairs with Michael's dry cleaning and coffee, Colombian dark roast, precisely how he liked it. The master bedroom door had been partially open, unusual for a couple who valued privacy, but it was the metallic scent that had stopped her first, followed by the sound of water, a shower running with no one attending it. When she'd pushed the door wider, the coffee had slipped from her grasp, splashing across imported Italian tiles as her mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. Michael Bennet, 48, sprawled across the bathroom floor, his throat cut so deeply he was nearly decapitated, his expression fixed in what appeared to be surprise rather than fear. "Mrs. Bennet?" Emma whispered into her phone when the 911 operator asked if anyone else was in the house. "I don't know. Her car isn't in the garage." This uncertainty would become the driving question of the investigation that followed. Rebecca Bennet, 45, Michael's wife of 20 years and partner in their charitable foundation, was nowhere to be found. Her closet missing key items, her passport gone from the safe, her Mercedes absent from its usual spot. Most telling was the message written in what appeared to be the victim's blood across the bathroom mirror, "Now you see me." Detective Sophia Reyes had worked homicide for the Chicago PD for 11 years, but something about the Bennet case triggered her investigative instincts the moment she ducked under the crime scene tape. Perhaps it was the stark contrast between violence and wealth, death framed by a multimillion-dollar modernist showplace featured in Architectural Digest just months earlier. Or perhaps it was the political minefield already forming, evidenced by the police superintendent's unprecedented appearance at the scene, nervously conferring with the chief of detectives. Michael Bennet hadn't just been wealthy, he'd been connected, major political donor, chair of the Chicago Symphony Board, and confidant to the mayor. As Reyes pulled booties over her shoes in the pristine foyer, she exchanged knowing glances with her partner, Detective James Keller. "This one's going straight to the headlines," she murmured, surveying the immaculate space now crowded with evidence technicians photographing bloody footprints leading from the master suite. Single laceration to the carotid artery, death would have been rapid but not instantaneous, reported medical examiner Dr. Nadia Patel, kneeling beside the body on the blood-soaked bathroom floor. From lividity and body temperature, I'd estimate time of death between midnight and 2 a.m. The wound shows clean edges, delivered with significant force in a single motion, left to right, suggesting a right-handed attacker. The blood spatter indicates the victim was standing at the sink when attacked from behind. Patel gestured to the mirror with its bloody message. The victim would have seen his attacker in the reflection just before or during the attack. The message was written afterward, using the victim's blood applied with what appears to be a finger. The most significant early evidence came from the home's sophisticated security system, which had captured Rebecca Bennet returning home at 10:17 p.m. the previous evening, entering through the garage in her Mercedes. Footage showed Michael arriving separately at 11:42 p.m., his Porsche pulling into the garage beside her car. The system recorded no other entries or exits until Emma Taylor's arrival at 8:15 a.m., yet Rebecca's Mercedes was gone, suggesting she had somehow departed without triggering the cameras. Technical analysis revealed the system had experienced a 3-minute outage at 2:47 a.m., just long enough for someone familiar with its operation to exit undetected. This precisely timed disruption pointed not to random violence but to premeditated action by someone intimately familiar with the house and its systems. By mid-afternoon, forensic technicians had collected evidence that shaped the investigation's initial direction. The murder weapon, an 8-inch Japanese chef's knife from the kitchen's magnetic strip, was found in the master bedroom shower, water still running as if in a hasty attempt to remove evidence. Blood spatter analysis indicated the attacker had likely been splashed during the assault, explaining the running shower and supporting the theory that Rebecca had fled after cleaning herself. Michael's cell phone, recovered from the nightstand, contained dozens of text exchanges with a contact listed only as AD, arranging meetings at the Peninsula Hotel in downtown Chicago over the past 6 months. Most significantly, Rebecca's overnight bag was missing, along with her passport, suggesting a planned rather than panicked departure. Interviews with household staff revealed subtle but significant changes in the Bennetts' relationship over recent months. Their housekeeper noted Rebecca had begun sleeping in the guest suite 2 weeks earlier, citing insomnia that disturbed Michael's rest. Emma Taylor reported increasing tension between them, manifesting in cold politeness rather than open conflict. The couple's driver mentioned overhearing a heated phone call during which Rebecca had said, "I won't be erased from my own life," though the context remained unclear. These testimonies painted a picture of a marriage under strain, maintained for public appearance while privately fracturing. The investigation's first major breakthrough came at 9:30 p.m. when analysis of Michael's phone and email accounts revealed the identity of AD. Alessandra Donati, 34, a curator at the Art Institute of Chicago who had worked closely with the Bennett Foundation on their arts education initiative. Detective Reyes located Donati at her Lake Shore Drive apartment, visibly shaken by news of Michael's death. During initial questioning, Donati confirmed their 6-month affair but insisted it had ended 3 days earlier when Michael had chosen to remain with Rebecca. He said he couldn't hurt her that way. Donati told investigators that they had too much history, too many shared connections. This timeline coincided with when Rebecca had begun sleeping in the guest room, suggesting she had discovered the affair just before its alleged termination. Parallel to these developments, financial investigators uncovered unusual activity in the Bennett's accounts. 2 weeks before the murder, Rebecca had transferred $1.2 million from their joint foundation account to a personal offshore account established in her maiden name. She had also liquidated her separate investment portfolio, converting assets to cash in a manner that minimized tracking. These financial maneuvers, combined with the missing passport and overnight bag, supported the theory that Rebecca had planned not just Michael's murder but her subsequent disappearance with meticulous attention to detail. The final piece of preliminary evidence emerged when crime scene technicians discovered a shredded photograph in the master bedroom waste bin. When reassembled, it revealed Michael and Alessandra embracing on what appeared to be a yacht, the Chicago skyline visible in the background. Most damning was the handwritten note on the back. "Forever yours, beyond any temporary obligations." This physical evidence of the affair, deliberately destroyed but not removed from the scene, suggested Rebecca had discovered concrete proof of the relationship, triggering the sequence of events that culminated in Michael's death. By midnight, less than 16 hours after the discovery of Michael's body, Rebecca Bennett had been formally named as the primary suspect in her husband's murder, with an international alert issued for her apprehension. Michael and Rebecca Bennett's love story had been chronicled in Chicago magazine's Power Couples, issue just 1 year before his death. They had met 22 years earlier at Northwestern University, where Michael, then a promising MBA student, had been immediately captivated by Rebecca Mitchell, a brilliant economics major with ambitions of her own. Their courtship unfolded against the backdrop of Chicago's economic renaissance in the late 1990s, gallery openings in the West Loop, symphony performances at Orchestra Hall, sailing on Lake Michigan during perfect summer weekends. They married after a 2-year engagement. Their wedding at the Chicago Cultural Center featured in society pages as the union of 2 rising stars in the city's financial firmament. The early years of their marriage represented genuine partnership, both professionally and emotionally. Michael provided the bold vision and risk appetite that built Bennett Capital into a hedge fund powerhouse, while Rebecca contributed strategic analysis and the social intelligence that opened doors to old money investors initially skeptical of the ambitious newcomer. Together, they navigated the treacherous waters of the 2008 financial crisis, emerging stronger when competitors faltered. They purchased their Oakwood Heights property in 2010, and Rebecca personally supervised its 2-year architectural transformation, creating a showcase home that reflected their shared aesthetic, minimalist design with strategically placed art pieces, mostly by emerging Chicago artists they had discovered and championed through their foundation. They complemented each other perfectly, observed Gerald Mansfield, Michael's former mentor and later investment partner. Michael had always been brilliant but impatient, prone to overcommitment. Rebecca provided the analytical ballast and emotional intelligence that kept him centered. She wasn't just decorative, she was essential to his success, and for many years he recognized that. This mutual respect distinguished the Bennetts from many power couples in their circle, where accomplished men often married women who served primarily as social facilitators rather than true partners. For nearly 15 years, they existed at the center of Chicago's financial and philanthropic elite, their relationship seemingly immune to the pressures that often plagued high-performance marriages. The first significant fracture appeared in 2016, when Rebecca experienced a health crisis, breast cancer diagnosed at stage 2, requiring surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. The illness transformed her physically and psychologically, forcing a temporary step back from both the business and their active social calendar. Michael initially provided exemplary support, rearranging his schedule to accompany her to treatments and ensuring their foundation commitments continued without interruption. However, as her recovery progressed more slowly than expected, subtle shifts in their dynamic emerged. Michael began attending social functions alone, explaining Rebecca needed her rest, gradually establishing an independent public presence separate from their previous unified front. When Rebecca returned to full involvement in their business and social worlds in late 2017, she found subtle but significant changes had occurred in her absence. Michael had hired several new executives at Bennett Capital, restructured their investment strategy, and established relationships with clients who related to him primarily rather than to them as a couple. Most tellingly, he had repositioned their foundation away from the educational initiatives Rebecca had pioneered toward arts patronage, particularly focused on contemporary art acquisition and exhibition sponsorship at major museums, including the Art Institute of Chicago, where Alessandra Donati had recently been appointed as a curator in the contemporary wing. It wasn't overtly hostile, Rebecca later wrote in documents recovered from her personal laptop. It was a gradual replacement, being thanked for my valuable perspective, while decisions moved forward that reflected none of my input. Michael stopped bringing business problems home for discussion. When I raised concerns, he assured me everything was fine while subtly suggesting that perhaps my illness had made me more risk-averse, less able to embrace the bold moves that had built our success. This professional diminishment coincided with changes in their personal relationship, Michael's increasing focus on fitness and appearance, his sudden interest in contemporary art beyond their previous collecting focus, his frequent evening events that increasingly excluded Rebecca. The arrival of Alessandra Donati as a significant figure in their philanthropic circle accelerated the growing distance between the Bennetts. Italian-born with degrees from the Sorbonne and Columbia, Alessandra possessed intellectual credentials that impressed Rebecca initially, making her an appealing foundation partner for their arts education initiatives. The two women developed what Rebecca believed was a genuine friendship, with Alessandra offering perspectives on European art markets that complemented Rebecca's more finance-oriented approach to collection building. This collaborative relationship made the eventual betrayal all the more painful. Rebecca had unwittingly facilitated the very connection that would ultimately threaten her marriage and identity. Rebecca first suspected the affair in March 2022, when she noticed uncharacteristic behavior from Michael, new cologne, secretive phone habits, sudden business trips that corresponded with Alessandra's Instagram posts showing her in the same locations. Rather than confronting him immediately, Rebecca employed the analytical approach that had served her well in finance, gathering evidence, establishing patterns, confirming suspicions before acting. She hired a private investigator who documented meetings between Michael and Alessandra at the Peninsula Hotel, intimate dinners at obscure restaurants outside their social circle's usual territory, And most damning, a weekend trip to Michael's Lake Geneva property when Rebecca was in New York visiting her sister. The betrayal is twofold, Rebecca confided to her therapist in sessions later reviewed by investigators. Not just the infidelity itself, but the specific choice of someone I trusted, someone I welcomed into our world. Every memory of my cancer recovery now feels contaminated. Was he already looking for my replacement while sitting beside me during chemotherapy? Was my illness simply an inconvenient interruption to his narrative? These therapy notes revealed Rebecca's growing sense that Michael's betrayal represented not just personal infidelity but an existential threat to her identity and legacy. As she recovered physical health, she found herself facing erasure from the life and institutions she had helped build, both professionally and personally. The situation escalated in early August 2022, when Rebecca discovered Michael had consulted with their estate attorney about modifying their wills and the governance structure of the Bennett Foundation. The proposed changes would have reduced Rebecca's control over foundation decisions while establishing Alessandra as a paid artistic director with significant influence over grant distributions. This discovery transformed Rebecca's calculated observation into active planning. She consulted with her own attorney, specifically inquiring about her rights to assets developed during their marriage and her options for protecting her role in their shared charitable work. The consultation revealed concerning vulnerabilities. Michael had begun systematically consolidating control over their most valuable assets, positioning himself to emerge from a potential divorce with minimal financial disruption. "He's not just replacing me in his bed," Rebecca told her sister Caroline during a weekend visit in early September, 2 weeks before Michael's death. "He's attempting to erase my contributions to everything we built together. This isn't about finding new love, it's about rewriting history to remove me from our shared narrative entirely." This conversation, recovered from text messages during the investigation, revealed Rebecca's growing conviction that Michael's betrayal extended beyond their marriage into an attempt to systematically diminish her life's work and legacy. For a woman whose identity was fundamentally tied to the institutions and relationships she had helped build, this represented a violation more profound than sexual infidelity. The final catalyst came on September 9, 2022, just 3 days before Michael's murder. After attending a foundation board meeting together, maintaining their public image as equal partners, Rebecca returned to Michael's office to retrieve her forgotten tablet. Through the partially open door, she overheard a phone conversation between Michael and Alessandra discussing their future together. "Once things settle, we'll restructure everything," Michael said. "The lawyers think we can minimize disruption if we time it correctly. Rebecca will keep her financial security, but it's time for fresh energy in the foundation's leadership." This overheard conversation contained the crucial phrase that would later appear in Rebecca's journal and her statement to police: "I won't be erased from my own life." September 12, 2022, 7:15 a.m. Michael Bennett began his last day alive with his usual morning routine, a 5-mile run along Lake Michigan's shoreline, tracked by his Garmin watch, followed by a protein smoothie prepared by their part-time chef who arrived at 6:30 a.m. 3 days a week. Security footage showed him moving through the house with practiced efficiency, wireless earbuds delivering his customary financial news podcasts. Rebecca was already awake, dressed in her home office reviewing investment reports with a precision that betrayed nothing of her internal state or intentions. 9:30 a.m. As Michael showered and dressed for the office, Rebecca enacted the first step in what investigators would later recognize as a meticulously planned sequence. She called Emma Taylor, instructing her to reschedule Michael's morning meetings due to a foundation emergency requiring his attention later that day. This unusual request, Rebecca rarely managed Michael's professional schedule, ensured his calendar would appear clear for last-minute arrangements. Simultaneously, she texted their regular chef requesting a special dinner for that evening, Michael's favorite meal of Dover sole with seasonal vegetables and a specific vintage of Montrachet they had discovered during their honeymoon in Burgundy. 11:15 a.m. Michael arrived at Bennett Capital's Michigan Avenue offices, where he spent the morning in calls with European investors. Colleagues later reported he seemed distracted but upbeat, mentioning plans for a significant announcement in the coming weeks. During this same period, Rebecca visited 3 separate ATMs across Chicago's North Side, withdrawing maximum daily limits from accounts Michael rarely monitored. At 12:30 p.m., security cameras captured her entering Tiffany & Company on Michigan Avenue, where she had her wedding set cleaned and inspected, making casual conversation with the jeweler about an upcoming anniversary celebration. She was remarkably composed, the jeweler later testified. She mentioned looking forward to their next chapter together, asking if I could recommend anyone to reappraise her rings for insurance purposes. 2:45 p.m. Rebecca returned home and accessed their shared safe hidden behind a panel in Michael's study, a space she entered infrequently despite their supposedly equal partnership. Security footage captured her removing several documents and a small velvet pouch containing family jewelry passed down from her grandmother. She then moved to the kitchen, where cameras recorded her opening the drawer containing specialized culinary tools, including the Japanese chef's knife that would later become the murder weapon. She examined it briefly before returning it to its magnetic strip, her expression revealing nothing as she continued preparations for the evening ahead. 4:30 p.m. Michael's calendar showed a foundation strategy review scheduled in his private office from 3 p.m. until 5 p.m. Hotel records later subpoenaed by investigators confirmed that during this same time frame, a room at the Peninsula Hotel registered to Bennett was occupied for approximately 90 minutes. Cell tower data placed both Michael's and Alessandra's phones at this location rather than his office. At 4:47 p.m., Michael texted Rebecca, "Meetings running long. Home by 7:30. She responded immediately, "Perfect. Henri is preparing something special. Don't be late." 6:15 p.m. Rebecca's preparations intensified as evening approached. Security footage showed her entering their bedroom with a small overnight bag, which she packed methodically before placing it in her Mercedes, parked in the garage. She selected an outfit for dinner with uncharacteristic care, a deep burgundy dress Michael had always admired, paired with the diamond earrings he had given her after Bennett Capital's first major success. At 6:40 p.m., she accessed their private server from Michael's study computer, downloading extensive documentation of her contributions to their business and foundation, evidence she would later claim was meant to protect her legacy rather than plan a murder. 7:43 p.m. Michael arrived home, his Porsche logging into the garage's automated system. Security footage showed Rebecca greeting him in the kitchen with a glass of champagne, her manner relaxed and welcoming, a striking contrast to the distant cordiality that had characterized their recent interactions. "You look beautiful," he remarked, accepting the champagne with apparent appreciation. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to celebrate my brilliant husband?" Rebecca replied, touching his arm affectionately. This exchange, captured by the kitchen's security camera, would later be scrutinized by behavioral analysts seeking indications of her mental state. They noted the perfect calibration of her performance, the warmth that reached her eyes, the natural fluidity of her movements, the absence of the tension that had characterized recent footage of their interactions. Michael, perhaps relieved by this apparent reconciliation, responded with genuine pleasure, following her to the dining room where their chef had prepared the elaborate dinner before discreetly departing at Rebecca's request. 9:15 p.m. Dinner concluded, the couple moved to their living room overlooking Lake Michigan, Michael carrying the remainder of the Montrachet while Rebecca brought 2 clean glasses. Security footage showed them sitting closer than they had in months, engaged in what appeared to be animated conversation about Bennett Capital's future projects. At one point, Rebecca placed her hand over Michael's, leaning forward to speak intently. Though interior cameras captured no audio, lip-reading experts later identified phrases including "our future" and "what we built together." 10:40 p.m. The evening progressed to Michael's study, where Rebecca suggested a nightcap, a rare 18-year-old Macallan she had purchased for the occasion. As he sipped the whiskey, Rebecca retrieved a large envelope from her office. "I found something I thought you should see," she said, sliding the envelope across his desk. Inside were the photographs her private investigator had taken. Michael and Alessandra entering the Peninsula Hotel, dining together, embracing on his Lake Geneva property. Michael's expression shifted from confusion to resignation as he examined the evidence of his betrayal. "How long have you known?" he asked finally, meeting her gaze directly for the first time in months. "Long enough to understand it's not just about sex," Rebecca replied, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. "It's about replacement. You're not just finding a new wife, you're erasing me from everything we built together." 11:37 p.m. The confrontation continued in their bedroom, where Michael attempted to minimize the relationship with Alessandra while acknowledging its reality. Security footage captured their movements between rooms, their body language shifting from controlled discussion to more animated confrontation. At 11:52 p.m., Michael entered the master bathroom, Rebecca following several minutes later. The bathroom camera showed Michael at the sink, removing his watch and wedding ring before washing his face, his nightly routine unchanged despite the emotional intensity of their conversation. At 11:58 p.m., the footage showed Rebecca standing in the bathroom doorway, watching him with an expression that combined profound sadness and resolute determination. What happened in the minutes after midnight remains subject to both forensic analysis and Rebecca's later testimony. Based on blood spatter patterns and the position of Michael's body, investigators determined that Rebecca approached him from behind as he stood at the sink. The Japanese chef's knife, retrieved from the kitchen during a moment when Michael had taken a phone call during their earlier confrontation, had been concealed somewhere in the bathroom. The attack came with surgical precision, a single deep slash across the throat, delivered with enough force to sever the carotid artery and ensure rapid blood loss. Michael's reflection in the mirror would have shown Rebecca in the moments before or during the attack, explaining the shock rather than fear registered in his final expression. The security system recorded no unusual movements for approximately 2 hours following the estimated time of death. At 2:44 a.m., cameras captured Rebecca entering the master bathroom wearing different clothes than earlier footage, her hair wet from the shower. She methodically cleaned certain areas of the bathroom while deliberately leaving others undisturbed, including the mirror on which she wrote, "Now you see me," using Michael's blood and her gloved finger. At 2:47 a.m., she accessed the security system's main interface in Michael's study, initiating the 3-minute outage that would cover her departure. When the system reactivated at 2:50 a.m., her Mercedes was gone from the garage, beginning the carefully planned escape that would occupy investigators for months to come. Rebecca Bennett evaded capture for 37 days, an impressive duration considering the international resources deployed to locate her. The investigation revealed she had implemented her escape with the same analytical precision she had brought to investment strategy. From Chicago, she had driven to Detroit, abandoning her Mercedes in a long-term airport parking facility before crossing into Canada at the Windsor-Detroit Tunnel using her passport. Canadian surveillance cameras captured her boarding a train to Montreal, where she disappeared before emerging 2 weeks later in Zurich, accessing funds through accounts established years earlier for European business development that Michael had forgotten existed. The Bennett murder dominated media coverage, transforming from local tragedy to national obsession as details emerged about the couple's fractured relationship and Michael's affair with Alessandra Donati. Cable news networks assigned dedicated correspondents to the case. Morning shows featured panels analyzing security footage of the Bennett's final evening together, and multiple podcasts launched series dedicated to examining the psychological dimensions of what journalists called the perfect wife's revenge. The case perfectly encapsulated contemporary anxieties about gender, power, and betrayal in elite marriages, with particular attention to what commentators called the erasure dimension, Rebecca's fear of being systematically removed from the narrative of her own life's work. Rebecca's eventual apprehension occurred through a combination of technological surveillance and human error. On October 19, 2022, facial recognition software at Geneva International Airport flagged a passenger passing through security despite her significantly altered appearance, darkened hair cut in a severe bob, different eyeglasses, and apparent weight loss. Swiss authorities, cooperating with Interpol, detained her as she attempted to board a flight to Singapore using her legitimate passport with a recently issued Swiss residency permit. When confronted, she reportedly displayed the same composure that had characterized her actions throughout, simply stating, "I suppose the chess match is over. Checkmate." The extradition process took 3 months, during which Rebecca maintained selective silence, speaking only to her Swiss attorney about procedural matters while refusing to address the murder allegations directly. When she finally returned to Chicago in January 2023, she entered the courthouse wearing a tailored gray suit that fashion websites immediately identified as European. Her hair returned to its natural blonde but styled in a severe bob that emphasized her changed appearance. Media coverage noted she appeared unnervingly self-contained, making deliberate eye contact with key figures in the courtroom while completely ignoring Alessandra Donati, who sat in the gallery's second row. The trial began in April 2023 after months of pre-trial maneuvering, including unsuccessful attempts by the defense to suppress the security footage from the Bennett home and the prosecution's successful motion to include evidence of Rebecca's elaborate advance planning as indicator of premeditation. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Marcus Reynolds, constructed a straightforward narrative of calculated murder motivated by jealousy, betrayal, and financial self-preservation. They presented the methodical preparations, the staged reconciliation dinner, and the blood message as evidence of a killing orchestrated by a woman who chose murder over the humiliation of being replaced both personally and professionally. The defense strategy proved more nuanced, presenting Rebecca not as a jealous wife but as a woman systematically betrayed across multiple dimensions of her identity. Expert witnesses testified about identity erasure in long-term partnerships and psychological violence through institutional displacement. Their most effective evidence came from Rebecca's own writings, journal entries documenting her cancer recovery alongside Michael's gradual withdrawal, emails showing her increasingly desperate attempts to maintain her role in their foundation, and documentation of financial maneuvers that would have significantly diminished her control over assets she had helped build. The defense never denied Rebecca had killed Michael but reframed the act as an extreme response to what one expert called comprehensive existential erasure. The trial's most dramatic moment came during Rebecca's own testimony. Breaking her months-long public silence, she spoke for nearly 6 hours across 2 days, articulating with devastating clarity the psychological journey from trusted partner to disposable accessory. "I didn't just lose my husband to another woman," she testified, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. "I was watching myself being systematically removed from every institution and relationship that defined my life's work. My contributions were being rewritten, my presence gradually eliminated, my future erased, all while I was expected to exit gracefully, to accept my replacement with dignity." When pressed by prosecutors about the premeditated nature of the killing, Rebecca acknowledged her extensive planning but offered a justification that resonated deeply with many observers. "I approached ending my marriage the same way Michael was approaching it, with strategic planning, resource allocation, and attention to narrative control. The difference was that his strategy left him alive with everything intact, while mine required more drastic measures to ensure I wasn't completely erased from our shared history." Public opinion remained sharply divided throughout the 11-week trial, with reactions often splitting along gender and generational lines. Women's advocacy groups organized support rallies highlighting patterns of female erasure in professional partnerships, while traditional commentators emphasized the calculated nature of the murder and Rebecca's apparent lack of remorse. The jury, 7 women and 5 men, deliberated for 9 days before reaching their verdict, guilty of second-degree murder rather than the first-degree charge sought by the prosecution, indicating they accepted some elements of the defense's provocation arguments while rejecting claims of impulsive action. Judge Elena Rodriguez, delivering her sentence in July 2023, addressed Rebecca directly. "Mrs. Bennett, the court acknowledges the profound betrayal you experienced across multiple dimensions of your life. The evidence clearly demonstrates systematic attempts to diminish your role in institutions you helped build and relationships that defined your identity. However, the methodical nature of your response demonstrates that this was not a crime of momentary passion but of calculated retribution. The law cannot condone murder as response to even the most profound betrayals." Rebecca received a sentence of 18 to 25 years, with possibility of parole after serving 15 years. A sentence below standard guidelines, reflecting the judge's consideration of the mitigating circumstances. The aftermath extended beyond the criminal proceedings into broader social and institutional implications. Bennett Capital experienced significant investor withdrawal following revelations about Michael's personal and professional ethics, eventually merging with a larger fund that eliminated the Bennett name entirely. The foundation underwent comprehensive restructuring, with Rebecca's sister Caroline assuming leadership of the educational initiatives Rebecca had pioneered. Alessandra Donati resigned from the Art Institute, leaving Chicago entirely as her professional reputation suffered from public perception of her role in the events leading to Michael's death. Most significantly, the case sparked ongoing national conversation about power dynamics in professional partnerships and the potential for psychological violence through institutional erasure. From prison, Rebecca Bennett published a memoir titled Invisible Ink: How Women Are Written Out of Their Own Stories, which became a bestseller and required reading in university courses on gender and organizational psychology. Her only public interview, granted to The New Yorker 2 years after her conviction, contained a statement that captured the complex moral ambiguity at the heart of her case. "I accept responsibility for taking Michael's life. What I could not accept was his systematic erasure of mine. Every institution we built together would have continued without me. My contributions footnotes at best in the narrative he was constructing. I chose to ensure that neither of us would control that narrative in the end. History may judge me harshly, but at least history will remember I existed."